Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a good time last night. Great to see everybody again. We made it to Thursday. This is fantastic. Give yourself a round of applause. I know the energy, we've been keeping it high. Boy, do I have something really special for you here today. Good morning, everybody. And it's been my privilege, distinct honor, to introduce to you one of the greatest friends to airline pilots ever, the Honorable Peter DeFazio. Chairman of the House T&I Committee. Chair DeFazio represents the 4th Congressional District of Oregon and was elected to chair the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee in 2019 after serving as the committee's ranking member. In the past, Representative DeFazio led the fight to ban cigarettes on airplanes. I remember when people used to smoke on airplanes. It was pretty awful. If you had that last row right before the smoking began, it didn't make any difference, right? As well as eliminate the FAA's dual mandate to both regulate safety and promote commercial aviation. More recently, he has introduced the Fair and Open Skies Act numerous times to end the approval by the United States of flags of convenience in international civil aviation. ALPA is proud to back this worker legislation, and our members have sent more than 9,000 messages to their representatives calling for their support. Now, during the pandemic, there's been no greater friend than Chairman DeFazio. He led the passage of the payroll support program. The payroll support program. That's why most of us are here. It's why we're never been stronger. Not one payroll support program, not 2, but 3. I mean, it was a total game changer. When compared to 9/11, with 50 bankruptcies and $84 billion in givebacks. Thank you, Chairman DeFazio, for saving our industry and saving the country. This was the most powerful pro-worker relief package in U.S. history to stabilize our airlines and ensure that the workers were ready to drive the economy once it was safe to fly again. And in 2019, Chairman DeFazio was a recipient of ALPA's Pilot Partisan of the Year Award. Actually, she should get it every year, to be honestly. It is my privilege to introduce to you the Honorable Peter DeFazio. Please, a warm welcome.
Well, thanks, everybody. It is an honor to be here this morning. I know Joe is moving on, and so am I. 36 years on the committee. I mean, he referenced me being elected chair. It was a very long apprenticeship, 32 years before I finally became the chair of the committee. He went over a few of the things I was going to go on a bit about some of the things I worked on over the years, and because I think they're instructive to where we are today and where we're going to be in the future. There's always going to be a conflict, which is, between, basically, Wall Street's kind of calling the shots these days with any corporation that's publicly traded, and there's so much pressure on the CEOs. We just went through a travesty on rail. I don't even know what the deal is. I've been in touch with the White House a lot. I haven't talked to them today. But we were looking at the potential for a national rail strike because the 2 major unions who actually operate the trains don't have any sick leave, none. And Burlington Northern Santa Fe, which used to be the most progressive railroad, has been infected, like the rest, by this precision scheduled railroading. And their new CEO has set up this system of points. And if you go to the doctor, that's 50 points. If you went to the doctor while you have 12 days on call, and you had a doctor's appointment, well, you get 50 points. You do that like 4 times, you're fired. No unpaid sick leave, none. The unions asked just for 5 unpaid sick days, and the railroads were threatening to lock them out, not settle. So I don't know how that worked out, but these conflicts are always going to go on. And in essential services like rail or aviation or any other form of transportation in this country, it is a huge conflict. And Joe mentioned a few things. The dual mandate. When I was first in Congress, I kept asking in hearings, I said, well, wait a minute, we're saddled with the old Civil Aviation Act, and the FAA inherited this, and they're supposed to regulate and promote the industry. I said, isn't this an inherent conflict? How do you do that? And they kept saying, no problem. And I tried to do an amendment on an FAA bill, and it wasn't accepted. And then ValueJet happened, and I got a call. I was very junior at that time, and they said, hey, that amendment you offered, could we have the language? And I said, what? Have the language? And they said, yeah, we want to put it in the bill. I said, in those days, we followed rules. I said, well, you can't put it in the bill. It wasn't conferenceable. It wasn't in the Senate or the House bill. They said, don't worry about it. And I got about 2/3 of what I'd wanted in terms of saying, no longer are you there to promote a mature industry. You're there to regulate in the public interest and for safety. And unfortunately, that kind of crept back in. And we were confronted with that in the Boeing MAX situation. What happened was, the CEO of Boeing got a phone call from American Airlines saying, hey, we're going to buy, I think it was 400 new planes, maybe it was 600, and they're all going to be Airbus unless you can do two things, match their fuel economy and no pilot training. Boeing was going to build a clean sheet airplane. I mean, the design is 50 years old, low wing. And, the CEO was like, oh my God, we'll be behind, we'll lose these orders, and scrap the new airplane, and let's just put bigger engines on this plane. And by the way, there can be no pilot training. That order came from the top. Again, driven by Wall Street, stock options, watching the profits. I mean, he was just like this great hero for quite a while. Oh my God, look at the profits. The MAX is going to be the most profitable plane in the history of the world. Unfortunately, FAA became again, sort of a captive regulator. The Seattle office, I mean, I never ever got the email chains of Ali Barami, the so-called head of safety, who in a 7-hour interview with my staff said he hadn't heard about the report that came out after the first crash that the FAA had, a term that said 15 of these planes will go in during the life of the fleet if the system isn't changed. Never heard of it. Who was, we don't, seriously, head of safety? So we passed the strongest bill ever on certification of airplanes. I mean, at first the Senate was going to do a nothing burger bill, and the Republicans in the House kept blaming the pilots. And when our report came out, very well documented, my staff had spent an incredible amount of time. We reviewed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, emails, all that. Suddenly, the Senate pulled their nothing burger bill, and the Republicans now said, oh, we'd like to work with you on this. And we got a major change. It's both going to be imposed on, the manufacturers and on the FAA to see that this never happens again. No more killing people for profit. That kind of stuff really pisses me off. So, we're not done yet. I'm not done yet. We're seeing, and I understand that my former staff, Jennifer Hamady, the chair of the National Transportation Safety Board, addressed you yesterday, and she talked about the ongoing efforts to push back on pilot training. Well, we've had the safest period in aviation, with the exceptions of the MAX, since we imposed the mandate, which only came after the horrible tragedy of Colgan Air. For years I had said, now, why is it that you can sit in the second seat with half as many hours as it takes to become a hairdresser in Oregon? I don't quite understand that. And we fought over that and fought over it until, unfortunately, again, people died. I mean, the FAA used to be known as the tombstone agency. It would be after something bad happens, then, we'll get around to regulating that or fixing that. Well, I mean, that's got to change. And we're not going to roll back the 1,500-hour rule. I mean, not. I also managed to leverage into the last FAA bill, which will be 5 years ago, at the end of this year, a couple of mandates. They were pretty explicit, not subject to interpretation. I mean, but unfortunately, there's this thing called Office of Management and Budget that kind of reaches out and grabs things, and they disappear into the maw of that entity. And one of them was secondary barriers. I had worked on, when I was early in Congress, we had hijackings. And I had a briefing. In those days, the FAA, again, history is instructive because we're going to fight these things over and over again. I may be boring you a little bit, but I had a briefing with the FAA about all the hijackings. And they were the ones who were in charge of, testing the system. They weren't licensed to carry guns. So the test was a fully encased 45, encased in lucite, in a carry-on bag with no more than 6 items in it. And they got through 40% of the time with this in plain sight going, through an X-ray. And I said, this is really bad. We need to do something. We need to protect the flight deck. That was way back, way back. And in fact, for a little while, United on the 57s, any of you flew those early on, for a while they had this kind of chain link barrier you could pull across. Didn't weigh hardly anything, didn't inconvenience anybody, but it allowed the pilots to come out, use the head, get some food, go back in, totally secure. No flight attendants standing there menacingly behind a food cart. And, unfortunately that, that fell by the wayside. And if we had had those things, 9/11 would never have happened. And, now, of course, we have the hardened doors, but you're still opening the door, and we still need the secondary barriers. And then, of course, freight is totally vulnerable. And, a 747 freighter is, would be quite a good weapon in the future. So I've been fighting this fight, and I didn't get freight, but I did get passenger that we should have secondary barriers. Well, that rule is finally, beginning to work its way through the bureaucracy 5 years later. And I hope it doesn't take another horrible tragedy to prove that we need that. I also had one line in the bill saying a flight attendant should get the same duty rest time as pilots. Now, how can you misinterpret that? But they said, oh, no, we're going to have to write a rule on that. That's like subject to interpretation. It's like, what? I mean, it's one sentence. So theoretically, they are going to finally adopt that. I've been promised they'll do it before I'm retired, but we'll see if we actually get that done. So the fight's ongoing. 5G, we almost had an incredible mess in January. The Trump FCC ignored everybody and anybody. In fact, Ajit Pai, the jerk who was head of it, made fun of me for raising all these concerns about the potential interference with altimeters or other instruments on the airplane. And they just said to the industry, do whatever you want, wherever you want, no restrictions. And, they were going to go ahead with this deployment. And there's, the ALPA was involved very early on this. They had been raising alarms with the FCC, and as implementation was going forward, as did I, as did the airlines and manufacturers. I mean, everybody's saying, wait a minute, this is potentially going to be a problem. They kept saying, oh, they're doing it all over the world. It's not a problem. Well, if you look at it, all over the world, in Japan, they operate at 5% of the power that these people want to use here. They say, well, look at France. Well, no, they have exclusion zones for the flight path. They have to point their antennas out, and they operate, again, at lower power. There's nowhere in the world where they were going to operate at this power, broadcasting right through the flight path. And, finally, with the, incredible effort by the administration, particularly Secretary Buttigieg, who had to get personally involved, they had their economic advisor working on it, and I just had to call him just before New Year's and say, you're not getting it done, and we're going to shut down aviation on the 6th of January. We're going to go to visual flight rules only in the whole country. So he got involved, and we got, a tentative temporary deal with the telecoms, again, all driven by Wall Street and profit, and that's not totally settled yet. We're looking at upgrading the altimeters across the fleet, but that's in anticipation of them continuing to operate the way they are now at lower power with some exclusions. But they haven't agreed to that. So that's an ongoing fight that you'll be involved in over the next couple of years. I mean, we should never, ever be jeopardizing safety. I mean, it's, oh, great, so I'll be able to walk down the street and stream a high-definition movie while the planes are falling out of the sky around me. That's really, really progress here in the United States of America. So, what I'm telling you is you're going to still need to really, really be engaged on these and other issues. I mean, you're up there every day. I mean, I got to thank you for keeping me safe for I don't know how many miles I've flown. I mean, it's over 6 million miles somewhere. You do a great job day in, day out, but you also have to be not just doing your job for you being here. You know that it takes political activism and using the clout you have as a union and working with your associated unions who share your concerns. The flight attendants, I understand Sarah Nelson was here. She was a key, along with Joe and others, when we did the payroll support program. And we did have to do it 3 times. The third time was the most difficult. We almost got screwed on that one, but we did get it done. My charge to you is, keep it up, keep flying competently, but also be totally engaged. Work with your leadership, your political team. You've got some great people working for the organization here in D.C. If we do that, we will have the best, safest aviation system in the busiest airspace in the world into the indefinite future. So thanks very much for all your support over very, very many years. Appreciate it.